Did you know the king had flops? Ever wonder which Elvis songs bombed initially, but later became beloved classics? Elvis Presley's legacy as the king of rock and roll remains untouchable decades after his passing, with countless #1 hits and platinum records to his name. However, even musical royalty sometimes released singles that radio stations ignored and record buyers overlooked. What's fascinating is how many of these commercial disappointments eventually transformed into fan favorites, concert staples, and influential recordings that musicians still revere today. Behind every chart-topping Elvis hit lies a collection of underappreciated gems that failed to make commercial waves upon their initial release. These songs, once relegated to the bargain bins of history, have since been rediscovered and elevated to cult status by generations of discerning fans and musicians. Through reissues, films, cover versions, and the ever-evolving cultural reassessment of Elvis's vast catalog, these once-forgotten tracks have found their rightful place in the Presley pantheon. The journey from commercial disappointment to beloved classic is a fascinating one, revealing much about changing tastes, the fickle nature of the music industry, and the enduring power of Elvis's artistry. These songs demonstrate that chart performance often fails to capture a recording's true artistic merit or long-term cultural impact. Sometimes, the most interesting aspects of an artist's work take years or even decades to be fully appreciated. Number 7. If I Can Dream. 1968. Have you ever heard a song that gave you goosebumps from the first note? When Elvis recorded If I Can Dream in June 1968, America was reeling from the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. just 2 months earlier. The song, written specifically for Elvis by Walter Earl Brown, served as the emotional finale to his legendary '68 comeback special on NBC, which marked his return to live performance after years of making increasingly formulaic movies. Despite the powerful performance and timely message of hope and unity, If I Can Dream only reached number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100 when released as a single. In the context of Elvis's career, where #1 hits had become the expectation, this relatively modest chart performance qualified it as something of a commercial disappointment. Radio stations, perhaps, expecting more conventional fare from the king, didn't embrace it with the enthusiasm it deserved. The song's production was unlike anything Elvis had recorded before. Producer Steve Binder convinced Elvis to perform the song, despite Colonel Tom Parker's reservations about its message and style. The recording features Elvis's most impassioned vocal performance in years, backed by soaring orchestration and a gospel choir. The intensity Elvis brought to the recording studio that day surprised even his closest associates, with many reporting that he was physically and emotionally exhausted after the final take. Over the following decades, If I Can Dream gradually transformed from an underperforming single into one of Elvis's most revered recordings. Its message of racial harmony and social unity, delivered with raw emotional power, has resonated increasingly with successive generations. Music critics now regularly cite it as one of the finest vocal performances of Elvis's entire career, shouting the full range of his interpretive abilities. The song's cultural resurrection reached its apex in 2015, when it was reimagined as a posthumous duet with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, introducing the powerful anthem to yet another generation. Documentaries about the civil rights movement have featured the song prominently, cementing its status as not just a great Elvis recording, but an important cultural packet reflecting America's painful struggle toward racial equality. Today, If I Can Dream is considered an essential Elvis track, despite its initially lukewarm commercial reception. Number 6. An American Trilogy, 1972. Can a nearly 5-minute medley of 19th-century American songs become one of Elvis's defining live performances? When Elvis added Mickey Newbury's arrangement of An American Trilogy to his concert repertoire in 1972, it seemed an unusual choice. The medley combines the Southern anthem Dixie with the spiritual All My Trials and the patriotic The Battle Hymn of the Republic into a sweeping musical journey through America's complicated history. RCA Records released An American Trilogy as a single in 1972, extracted from Elvis's live album as recorded at Madison Square Garden. Despite the powerful performance and Elvis's obvious emotional investment in the material, the single stalled at number 66 on the Billboard charts, making it one of his poorest performing releases of the period. Radio programmers, likely confused by the song's length and complexity, largely ignored it in favor of more conventional fare. The recording's commercial failure probably had multiple causes. At nearly 5 minutes, it far exceeded the standard length for radio singles of the era. Its arrangement, beginning softly before building to an operatic climax, didn't fit easily into radio formats. Additionally, by combining Dixie, associated with the Confederate South, with Battle Hymn of the Republic, associated with the Union North, the medley created a musical reconciliation that might have seemed politically awkward during the still simmering tensions. Despite its poor chart performance, Elvis continued performing An American Trilogy at virtually every concert for the remainder of his career, consistently receiving standing ovations. Concert recordings reveal that Elvis poured tremendous emotion into these performances, sometimes appearing visibly moved during the song's climax. For many fans who attended his 1970s concerts, this showstopper became one of their most vivid memories of seeing Elvis live. Following Elvis's death in 1977, An American Trilogy steadily grew in stature. Documentary filmmakers frequently use it to soundtrack pivotal moments in Elvis retrospectives, appreciating its cinematic quality and emotional impact. Elvis impersonators around the world consider it an essential part of their repertoire, trying usually in vain to capture the King's magisterial delivery. Music critics now regularly cite it as evidence of Elvis's underappreciated interpretive abilities and his gift for bringing gravitas to material that could easily turn melodramatic in lesser hands. Number 5. Reconsider Baby, 1960. Would you believe Elvis recorded one of the rawest blues performances of his career in the midst of his post-Army commercial comeback? When Elvis entered Nashville's RCA Studio B in March 1960 to record material for his Elvis's Back album, he shocked producer Chet Atkins by delivering a blistering version of Lowell Fulson's blues standard, Reconsider Baby. The performance featured Elvis in full blues shouter mode, accompanied by Scotty Moore's stinging guitar and a horn section anchored by legendary saxophonist Boots Randolph. Despite the track's obvious quality and Elvis's passionate performance, RCA didn't consider Reconsider Baby single material. In an era when Elvis's commercial appeal was being carefully managed with teen-oriented ballads and pop confections, this gritty, adult-oriented blues performance didn't fit the marketing strategy. The song remained album track, buried on side 2 of Elvis's Back, while more commercial fare, like Stuck on You and It's Now or Never, dominated radio play and the charts. The recording session itself has become legendary among Elvis aficionados. Elvis reportedly recorded the track in a single take, positioned in the middle of the studio, surrounded by the musicians rather than isolated in a vocal booth. The resulting performance has an intimate live-in-the-studio quality rarely captured on Elvis's more polished recordings. Saxophone player Boots Randolph later commented that he'd never seen Elvis more engaged and passionate during a recording session. Blues purists and rock critics, often skeptical of Elvis's contributions to American music, have singled out Reconsider Baby as evidence of his authentic blues credentials. Noted critic Peter Gurulnik called it arguably the best blues recording Elvis ever made, while others have suggested it offers a tantalizing glimpse of the raw, unfiltered artist Elvis might have been had commercial considerations not dominated his recording career. The performance demonstrated that even after his army service and entry into mainstream pop culture, Elvis could still channel the blues influences that had shaped his musical development. In the decades following Elvis's death, Reconsider Baby has been increasingly recognized as one of his finest studio performances. It has appeared on numerous compilations, focusing on Elvis's more authentic rock and blues recordings, often serving as a counterpoint to the perception that his post-army career was dominated by formulaic material. Blues historians have embraced it as an example of white artists genuinely engaging with and extending the blues tradition rather than simply appropriating it. For many serious Elvis fans, it represents the road not fully taken in his recording career. Number 4. Tomorrow is a Long Time, 1966. How could one of Bob Dylan's favorite covers of his own work languish as an Elvis movie soundtrack album cut? When Elvis recorded Bob Dylan's folk ballad, Tomorrow is a Long Time during sessions for the Spin-Out soundtrack in May 1966, few could have predicted the recording's eventual importance. The tender acoustic performance, radically different from the upbeat pop songs that dominated Elvis's movie soundtracks of the period, was tucked away as a bonus track on the Spin-Out album rather than released as a single. RCA's decision not to release this haunting interpretation as a single seems baffling in retrospect. The mid-1960s saw folk music surging in popularity, and a single that showcased Elvis's more thoughtful side might have reconnected him with an adult audience, increasingly alienated by his formulaic movie songs. Instead, the track remained hidden on an album that, like most of Elvis's soundtrack releases from this period, received little critical attention or radio play outside its title track. The recording session itself represented a rare moment of artistic seriousness during Elvis's soundtrack years. After completing the required songs for the Spin-Out film, Elvis surprised the session musicians by asking to record Dylan's composition, which he had been playing privately on his guitar. The resulting performance features delicate acoustic guitar, minimal percussion, and one of Elvis's most nuanced vocal performances of the era. Session musicians later recalled Elvis's obvious emotional connection to the material, a stark contrast to his often perfunctory approach to movie songs. Bob Dylan himself later called Elvis's version of Tomorrow is a Long Time his favorite cover of any of his songs, stating in a 1969 interview, "Elvis did that song of mine. That's the one recording I treasure the most." Coming from Dylan, whose work was being covered by countless folk and rock artists of the era, this represented extraordinary praise. Dylan's endorsement helped alert serious music critics to the fact that beneath the increasingly commercial veneer of Elvis's official releases, his musical instincts remained remarkably authentic. In subsequent decades, Tomorrow is a Long Time has been consistently singled out as evidence of what Elvis might have accomplished had he been allowed greater creative freedom during his movie years. The track has appeared on numerous compilations, focusing on Elvis's more serious, artistic achievements, often paired with other folk-influenced performances like In My Way and I'll Remember You. For many Elvis scholars, it represents a crucial missing link between his early rock and roll innovations and the more adult-oriented material he would embrace during his 1968 comeback. Number 3. Suspicious Minds. Live version, 1970. Did you know Elvis's greatest comeback hit became even more powerful in concert? When Elvis returned to live performing in Las Vegas in 1969, Suspicious Minds quickly became the emotional centerpiece of his show. The studio version had restored Elvis to commercial relevance, reaching number 1 on the Billboard charts in November 1969. However, the live version Elvis developed with his TCB band took the song to new heights, extending it to over 7 minutes with a dramatic false ending and explosive finale that consistently brought audiences to their feet. RCA released a live version of Suspicious Minds from Elvis's February 1970 Las Vegas engagement on the album, On Stage, but chose not to issue it as a single, perhaps fearing it would compete with other Elvis releases. At over 6 minutes long, the live version certainly violated commercial radio's time constraints. The recording captured Elvis at the absolute peak of his performing powers, commanding the stage with a Minogue intensity that translated remarkably well to Pymite. What makes the live version special is how it transforms the already excellent studio recording into something even more dramatic and emotionally resonant. Elvis and his band developed an extended arrangement featuring a false ending where the music would drop to near silence before Elvis whispered, "I hope the suspicion passes soon," and gradually built the song back to an even more powerful conclusion. Night after night, this moment created an electric connection between performer and audience that veteran Vegas entertainers found astonishing. The live recording reveals much about Elvis's often underappreciated skills as a band leader and arranger. Throughout the performance, he signals tempo changes, dynamic shifts, and instrumental breaks with subtle vocal cues and body language that his musicians follow precisely. The extended bridge section features Elvis improvising vocally while maintaining perfect control of the band's intensity. Skills honed during his gospel singing, background but rarely showcased so effectively on his studio recordings. Over time, this live version has eclipsed even the hit studio recording in the estimation of many serious Elvis fans. Concert films and documentaries frequently feature it as the climactic moment, recognizing its power to convey the electricity of Elvis's early 1970s performances. Musicians from Bruce Springsteen to U2 have cited this specific arrangement as influential on their own approach to extending songs in concert. For many, this live Suspicious Minds represents the perfect synthesis of Elvis's vocal prowess, stage charisma, and musical sophistication. Number 2. Mystery Train, 1955. How could one of rock and roll's most influential recordings fail to reach the pop charts? When Elvis recorded Junior Parker's Mystery Train at Sun Studios in July 1955, he and producer Sam Phillips created what many music historians now consider one of the defining recordings of early rockabilly. The hypnotic, echo-drenched production, Scotty Moore's innovative guitar work, and Elvis's alternately haunting and hiccuping vocal combined to create something entirely new in American music. Despite its obvious quality and innovation, Mystery Train failed to chart on Billboard's pop listings when released as the B-side to I Got to Remember to Forget in August 1955. While the A-side eventually reached number 1 on the country charts, Mystery Train remained largely overlooked by contemporary radio programmers and record buyers outside the country music audience. At a time when the music industry was still rigidly segregated, the record's obvious blues influences likely limited its mainstream appeal. The recording session that produced Mystery Train has been extensively analyzed by music historians. Working with the minimal equipment available at Sun Studios, Sam Phillips achieved a revolutionary sound by positioning Elvis and the band to create natural slap-back echo in the room, while further processing Elvis's voice to create the recording's distinctive atmospheric quality. Scotty Moore's guitar solo, combining country-picking techniques with blues phrasing, would influence generations of rockabilly and rock guitarists. In the decades following its release, Mystery Train steadily grew in stature among musicians and critics. The track's hypnotic rhythm, ghostly production, and Elvis's emotionally ambiguous vocal delivery made it a touchstone for artists ranging from the Beatles and Bob Dylan to The Clash and Bruce Springsteen. Music writers frequently cite it as the quintessential example of the Sun sound that Phillips pioneered, representing a perfect fusion of white and black musical traditions into something entirely new. By the 1970s, Mystery Train had achieved canonical status among rock critics and musicians, despite never having been a hit. Covers by artists, including Paul Butterfield, the band, and Junior Parker himself, reclaiming his own composition, helped introduce the song to new generations. Rock histories consistently rank it among Elvis's most significant recordings, with Rolling Stone placing it at number 77 on their list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. What began as an overlooked B-side has become recognized as one of the foundational recordings of rock and roll. Number 1. Trying to Get to You, 1955. Ever wondered which Elvis recording Keith Richards called one of the most perfect pieces of music I've ever heard? When Elvis recorded Trying to Get to You at Sun Studios in July 1955, he delivered an emotionally raw performance that combined gospel intensity with rockabilly energy. The song, originally recorded by the Eagles, a black vocal group, not the 1970s band, conveyed Elvis's remarkable ability to transform rhythm and blues material into something distinctly his own. Despite its now legendary status, Trying to Get to You wasn't even released as a single during Elvis's time at Sun Records. When Elvis moved to RCA in early 1956, the track was included on his debut album, Elvis Presley, but was overshadowed by the massive singles Heartbreak Hotel, Blue Suede Shoes, and I Want You, I Need You, I Love You. Radio stations focused on these hits, leaving album cuts like Trying to Get to You largely unheard by the general public. The recording itself has a fascinating history. Elvis had discovered the Eagles' original version while stationed at Humes High School in Memphis, where he was known to spend hours in the school's music room, listening to rhythm and blues records. His Sun Studios version features unusually emotional singing even by Elvis's passionate standards, with his voice cracking with feeling during key phrases. Scotty Moore's guitar work weaves around Elvis's vocal with remarkable intuition, creating a conversation between voice and instrument rarely achieved in early rock recordings. A second version of Trying to Get to You, recorded during the legendary $1 Million Quartet session in December 1956, provides fascinating insight into Elvis's emotional connection to the song. On this informal recording, Elvis tells Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, and Jerry Lee Lewis that Trying to Get to You is one of his favorite songs, before delivering an even more uninhibited performance than the studio version. The raw emotion in this performance suggests the song held special personal significance for Elvis beyond its musical appeal. In subsequent decades, serious Elvis fans and rock musicians have increasingly cited Trying to Get to You as one of his defining recordings. Its combination of gospel fervor, blues feeling, and rockabilly drive encapsulates everything that made Elvis's musical vision revolutionary. Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones has repeatedly named it his favorite Elvis recording, citing the perfect balance of elements and the unvarnished emotion of Elvis's delivery. What began as an overlooked album track has gradually been recognized as one of the purest expressions of Elvis's artistic genius. Are these overlooked gems actually more revealing of Elvis's true musical soul than his biggest hits?